I'm back with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and we're talking about the Texas Democrats. Governor Abbott, let me talk about what the Texas Democrats are so exercised about, namely this voter integrity law. Now, as you know, President Biden in Pennsylvania gave a kind of tempestuous speech in which he presented these voter integrity laws as being a kind of attack on democracy. He implied that these laws taken together pose the greatest threat the country has faced since the Civil War. He said that's not hyperbole. Now, setting aside the obvious hyperbole of it, talk about the Texas voter integrity law and talk about how it tries to achieve the simultaneous goals, which I heard you yourself say, making it easier to vote and harder to cheat. Let's go into some of the specifics of the law.
I'll do that, but first I have to point this out, and that is you kind of candy-coated what the president said. What the president really did, he once again engaged in name-calling. He used the phrase racist. He said Jim Crow too. But remember, this is the very same president who just a few months ago called me a Neanderthal because I opened up Texas 100% and no masks. And so we have a president who is resorting to name calling when he has no substance to rely upon. And that is exactly the situation that the Democrats are in today, because they have zero substance backing up their claims that what the Texas law does is to prevent anybody from voting. What the Texas law actually does, it increases voting rather than decreases voting. Let me explain how. Texas already has 12 days of early voting. We are adding more hours to vote during those early voting days, including the opportunity for anybody who wants to vote to get paid time off from work to be able to go vote. So it's far easier to vote under this new law in Texas than it has ever been before. The only thing, Dinesh, that we are really cracking down on is a bipartisan issue. And that is in Texas as well as in other states. It is far easier for people to cheat during the mail-in ballot process. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of a federal judge appointed by Barack Obama, who wrote in a legal opinion after evaluating all the facts in Texas that voter fraud occurs in Texas in abundance with regard to absentee ballots. Part of the proof of that in a different case was that the Obama administration sent down FBI agents and a U.S. attorney in the state of Texas to investigate and to prosecute people in South Texas who were using cocaine to buy absentee ballot votes. Voter fraud is real. It must be stopped. It occurs most often in the mail-in ballot process. We're very simply trying to ensure the sanctity of the ballot box with regard to mail-in ballots.
Now, Biden seems to think that anything that makes it, quote, harder to vote is inherently racist because presumably, at least this would seem to be the premise, that blacks and Latinos don't know how to get IDs. Blacks and Latinos don't know how to vote on any day other than a Sunday. So you get sort of all these ideas that any provisions that increase the burden of voting automatically are an attack on the democratic process itself. What is your take specifically on the voter ID issue? Why is it that voter IDs are not racist?
Well, first, I can tell you that what has happened in Texas disproves that thesis that's being articulated not only by President Biden, but all the Democrats and the mainstream media, because Texas did pass almost 10 years ago a voter ID law in the state of Texas. And let me tell you what happened after voter ID became law in Texas, and that is voter participation increased among everybody, including racial minorities. So as opposed to hindering the ability of racial minorities to go vote, they voted in even greater numbers after voter ID was put into place. And so this is just one amongst all the false narratives that the Democrats try to pose just because they want to try to seemingly keep open avenues that would allow them to cheat in the voting process.
Do you think, Governor Abbott, that there's a second motive apart from the idea that cheating is helping them to get across the finish line? And this other idea is simply the fact that the Democrats are trying to either distract attention from other issues that are a problem for them, or alternatively, that they're losing support among critical groups. Trump, for example, made headway among African-American males. You know about the south part of Texas, where Latinos who have been habitually Democratic are now starting to move toward the Republican camp. So the signs are not all that good for the Democrats, and maybe they believe that if they can nail down and control the process, they will have less to fear at the ballot box in 2022 and 2024.
Dinesh is a very insightful point because here's the reality. Whenever the Democrats are losing on an issue, they start playing the racist card because they think somehow the racist card is going to gain them support. You pointed out the reality in Texas, and that is in South Texas along the border, which has traditionally been Democrat territory. In this last election, President Trump got a record percentage of votes in the Rio Grande Valley along the border area that I've never seen any other Republican president ever get. And the reason why President Trump got so much vote down there is because, for one, they support a secure border. Two, they support the energy jobs that exist down there. But three, they support the principles and values that President Trump stood for. Every single election, I've always gotten at least about 45% or more of the Hispanic vote in the state of Texas. As you pointed out, African Americans are realizing that the party that stands for economic opportunity is the Republican Party. And so, yes, Republicans are making gains among all demographic groups. And so the only thing that Democrats can cling to is say racism, 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 hoping that it will disrupt the gains that Republicans are achieving.
Governor Abbott, let me ask you one more question. I've been seeing that Kristi Noem and others are talking about sending people to Texas to help on the border with the wall. There's been some talk about Texas having its own wall. Is that a real possibility? Can Texas, in fact, build a wall and keep illegals out? Or is it the case that federal law somehow overcomes that and the Biden people can do whatever they want regardless of what you try to do to stop them?
Texas is building its own wall. The Biden administration can do absolutely nothing about it. We have Texas state property that's on the border. We have private property that's on the border and private property owners who are cooperating with the state of Texas. We are already in the process of aggregating mile after mile after mile on which the border wall can be built. We have the Texas Facilities Commission that's working to hire a program manager to oversee this process. They will be going out and offering requests for proposals for bids that come in. We have already, even before the formal process has begun, a lot of good offers to build the wall. You will see that wall is going to be built and built a whole lot faster than what people realize.
This is absolutely awesome. Delighted to hear. Thank you, Governor Abbott, for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Dinesh. All the best to you.